Good evening and thank you for coming. My name's Holly McKinney and this is the Moose Fire Community Meeting. We are going to have this meeting tonight in sort of two parts. We'll have a fire part followed by a forest issues part, and we'll have some questions in between those parts as well as at the end. And then afterwards, if you have further questions that we didn't get to, we'll be available to answer those individually. Tonight is September 22nd for those of you listening online, and we are on our last meeting for the Great Basin Team 1. This is our transfer time to the new incoming team. Current fire statistics are we have 130,109 acres on the fire, and we're at 51% containment with 635 personnel working the fire. Now the fire acreage is growing only very slowly right now, but that doesn't mean we are working at that pace. There is still a lot of work being done on the fire, and it continues between the two teams with the very smooth transfer of command and what's going on. We actually have a shadowing day to help us get on board and working right away. So that's all going forward. And to further explain what's happening with the fire right now, we have our Operations Sections Chief, Matt Call, who will explain details.
I get to use the pointer. Hi, Matt Call, Planning Ops Trainee with Great Basin Team 1. I'm not going to bore you with minutia. I'm going to kind of talk more generalizations on kind of what's going on now and kind of how that's going to shift to the transition. There are people in the room that can answer more detailed questions when it gets to it, as far as maybe some of the repair work that's happening. So where do I need to stand so you can see this? Right here where the mark is? All right. Sorry. All right. Obviously, like we've been talking, all the black stuff is all the contained edge. Not a lot of work happening in the river corridor other than we are prepared to open this road up. We have some equipment in place in case we have rain that causes some debris flow down on the highway here. All of this area up Panther Creek has already been addressed. We have some repair work going on here, mostly with some heavy equipment and machinery here. Let me back up a little bit. I'll talk about kind of big picture. We're making a shift right now from suppression to repair. So when we got a bunch of rain, we were able to sort of shift all of our resources, or most of our resources, from suppression efforts to repair, but kind of keep a good balance. So from suppression side, we're doing a couple things. We're looking at where we can at all of this uncontained edge, kind of where it makes sense for us to get in and do a little bit of work. And where those places are, it's really hard to tell with this map, but this is Stormy Peak Road. So north of Stormy Peak, a lot of the hot spots and edge here has been addressed. I would suspect that the new team coming in, once they look at it for a few days, will probably be turning that edge black. There's been quite a lot of work, but not really a continuous line put in with any machine or hand crew. A lot of hot spotting, a lot of short pieces of line to limit and stop the growth of that fire going downslope and to the east. Where that's also happening is a little bit here in the watershed to help prevent the fire spread from moving further to the south. We've ordered what's called a fire use module. It's kind of a specialized crew that works fairly independently. It's a short crew of about 10 to 12 people, and their singular mission is, right now, is to focus on that and kind of see what they can do to limit the spread and really monitor that, kind of keep a good eye on that for the team as far as addressing that where it makes sense and where possible. And so that crew they've been here about 2 days, so they probably have almost a full 2 weeks left on them to primarily focus on that until the current team decides or has the ability to shift them to another priority. So those are the two areas where we're focusing on suppression. Other than that, we're largely doing repair. Where most of our repair work is happening is right here on the diamond line with both, we have a lot of machine lines and a lot of hand lines that are being repaired. A few along this area here on the bottom end of the 300 road, a lot of chipping up here on the upper part of the 300 road, and then a lot of heavy equipment on the power line here. So what that looks like is when we came in probably, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we opened this line up with some logging equipment and took out some hazard trees that had the potential for falling on the power lines if the fire came through. Well, now all that wood's on the ground and has the possibility of being an asset, merchantable or for firewood. So we're pulling that out and putting it somewhere where it's more usable and it can be kind of sorted and used for marketable assets, whatever that might be. So getting that off is taking some time. So it's kind of hard to tell in here, but that right there is about a mile. So getting that up slope and up to other landing areas is taking quite a bit of equipment and quite a bit of time. So that's kind of a large project. That is likely to necessitate shutting the power off. We're looking at that window with the liaisons and the power company. They're talking to their customers, and we're hoping to minimize that time so that it's really limited to the shortest amount possible. And we're going to try to do as much work as possible without shutting the power down. The reason we would need to is there's some equipment that is large and boomed and has the potential for hitting the power lines, and we want to avoid that hazard or that potential hazard. So that's a pretty big, pretty large project. There's still a little bit of falling and bucking going along on the O2O road. We took out a lot of hazard trees, a lot of snags, so dead trees that had the potential for falling on the road if the fire were to be on this side of the road and spread to the west. So those trees have been removed. We've gone a little bit deeper than the feller bunchers can reach with some hand crews, and those are being bucked up and brought out to the road to make them a little more accessible. All of the Leesburg and Bear Track mine area water handling assets are still in place, so the next team can kind of decide when the appropriate time is to remove those. So that would be pump systems, sprinkler systems, hose lays to provide protection on the old cabins there, the historic sites, as well as the mine. Along the structures here, we left all of the plumbing assets except for the pumps. So we don't want the pumps to get damaged. We're not manning them every day, so we've located them in the supply cache at our logistics center here at ICP, and we can reinsert those whenever it makes sense. And then we've left that for the next team to kind of decide when is it appropriate to start pulling all of that hose and equipment out. I think that's about it logistically. We've kept as many assets as possible and tried to order more crews and extend crews to try to set the next team up so that they're not emptying out. Because when we came, a lot of the crews were just cycling in as well and on the same time cycle. So what we wanted to do is make sure the next team had kind of a stacked deck in their favor, and then they have the ability to manipulate that as much as possible. So from here, I think we're in a good spot. I think Team 5 is set up for good success, and we feel pretty good about that. The owl fire, we turned back over last night, if I remember right, with 100% containment at 747 acres. So we feel pretty good about that. That's all I've got.
Good evening. Hi, John Kern, Fire Behavior Analyst with the team. I've been asked tonight to come on out and talk a little bit about our weather and then the fire behavior, and then maybe have a little look, see what's in our future as it relates to weather and fire. So the product that we've got here is our general fire weather forecast looking out for the next week or so, a little less than that. And I think what you'll see without, if you're a detailed person like myself, you can dive into the numbers there, but if you're just a trends kind of person, you can see that we are looking at things getting a little bit warmer. This is our temperature line here of 68 degrees for a max tomorrow, going out to 78 degrees as we move out through the week there, and it changes from our green, less danger or moderate burning conditions to our caution level there. I would also kind of call your attention to the relative humidity on the bottom line, again, where we're going from green conditions now with the rain, that we're actually currently having rain up on the top of the mountain there, and we did pick up 0.3 of an inch across the fire area last night, actually up to almost 0.6 up at the Sheep Eater area there where we've got one of the fire raws at. So 0.6 down to about 0.3 across the fire all last night over a couple of 3-hour periods. So that helps soak it in. So that's all good, and a little bit of rain now. So we're in our green conditions now. But as we look out into Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and as our meteorologist who's on staff here this evening says, also Thursday, Friday, and on out, it's looking like this high pressure will be in here with our warmer temperatures and a little bit lower relative humidities, not down into the single digits like we were having here, y'all were having here in July when the fire started, in August when it was making those big strong runs, but still drier than what is normal for this period. So kind of a dry period here. And our wind gusts are going to stay just about where they are. So mostly it's the temperature up and the humidity down a little bit is what we're picking up on this, this graph here. So we'll leave that there. Let me tell you a little bit about the fire behavior that we're out there. I was lucky enough, I consider myself, to be out on the fire line today. Got out around most of the eastern half of the fire where we are seeing what little fire behavior there is out there. We did come across some areas where it's still smoldering, a little bit of active moving through. It was very isolated, an area about 10 or so feet, 10 by 10, underneath a single Doug fir that I was looking at in this example. The rain just cannot get through that canopy of a tall Doug fir with its needles down to the ground. So the needles underneath it were still smoldering and just, 1 or 2 inches of flame there moving, but it's still alive. There were a couple other areas underneath large logs where you could see the ash had not been hit by that 1/3 of an inch of rain. So there's still some dry areas out there. We worked our way up to the 53 area up on the peak there, and then looked back at the watershed area. No smoke showing on the back side of that, the south side of the area into the watershed, so that's all good news for us. But there are still areas that you can actually see from town and up on the hill further back into the woods that are still smoldering. So there's still some heat out there, very limited. We don't expect to see surface movement of that, but it is able to survive that 3/10 of an inch of rain that we got. But we've had that before. Last week we received about that same amount, and it really does limit the number of spots that are still alive. So each one gets less active each time, and we have fewer of them every time we can get one of these rain events to come through. So we're looking really good there. With each passing week, we are closer to the end of the season, wherever that might be it 2 weeks away or 4 or 5 weeks away, possibly. I looked at going back actually 20 years of weather data last night at different charts of the energy release to see which ones really, as Evan likes to say, the season will fall on its face. And that means you get rain and then another rain and then another rain, and it puts it out here about the beginning of October. Other years it'll get a rain but then come back and work its way through the third, the second and third half of October there. So that is still a possibility for us. And with conditions getting a little warmer and drier the next week or so, I expect to see that smoldering continue on, and we'll have to keep working towards minimizing things and be ready for it, just like Matt was saying there. So let's go ahead and look at the next forecast. So the Weather Service, especially our IMETs here, don't like trying to forecast things way out into the future. 1 and 2 day forecasts they're pretty accurate with, but when we're looking at this product here is an 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. So it's looking a little bit at climatology and a little bit at weather. And what you're seeing here is that we're thinking our temperatures are going to be above average, not super above average, but a greater than 50% chance of our temperatures being above average for this period. So that makes sense with what we're seeing over the next 4 or 5 days. So it looks like it's going to continue on at least 8 to 14 days. And that's our temperature. And for precipitation, the amount of rain that we're expecting to see on the next slide is a little bit below normal. So that's not exactly what we want to see. But again, it's in the lower numbers, only a 30 to 40% chance. So it's leaning towards below. Maybe near normal, but maybe a little drier. So a little warmer, a little drier is what we're looking at here over the next 8 to 14 days. But we are to the point where it's limited smoldering out there. Each one of these rain events does help us out. When we talk about that ERC coming down, that means less heat comes off of every little bit of the fuel out there that's burning. So with each one of these days, it helps. Each several weeks we go, the sun is a little bit lower in the sky. The days are getting shorter. We've already lost in the last 4 or 5 weeks over 3 hours of daylight compared to earlier in the summer there. So each day is shorter, takes a longer period, or I should say it's less efficient at drying up those rains that we got. The rain that we got last night will do more good now than 3/10 of an inch back in August or July. That would get dried out by an early summer day. Here, that moisture that's in there will take a couple of days to get rid of, and we should see this really reduced fire behavior out to 3 to 5 days based on some of our past studies. So we're looking at a quiet 3 to 5 days, helping us get towards that inevitable end of the season, but it may be a couple weeks out, maybe more than just a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks out. So that's what we're seeing right now in the weather and fire behavior. All right, thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Evan Skolny, Incident Commander of Great Basin Team 1. So as our time on the Moose Fire starts winding to a close, 'there's just a few key points that I'd like to summarize for you all. The first is that the fire, as it relates to the fire, is going to continue on. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to continue on for the next 2 weeks. It's going to We're very cognizant of the fact that this has been a long haul for everybody in the community. We're going on 10 weeks, and actually on the cusp of going into week 11 when this fire first started back in July. And believe me, when the 5 teams that have been on this fire have done our duty and done our time, we all wish we could have been the team that drove the golden spike into this fire and ended it for you. Unfortunately, that's not the case. As Matt was describing, we've got the last remaining open edge of the fire is the southeast corner that face up above town in Fenster, Bob Moore, and then also Jesse Creek, the about 900 or so acres that's inside the municipal watershed. That represents some of the most challenging ground that we've had to fight. Not only, not necessarily so much the hillside, the steepness of slopes, but the presence of snags, or as we've been calling, the standing dead trees, or in the logging industry is what they call widowmakers. The high presence of those snags and some of the heaviest concentration that we have on this entire fire is in the watershed, or it's in the hillside right above town. Our ability to engage the fire in close and keep firefighters safe and keep them from getting hit by snags is not very good. And so our best approach there is to avoid putting firefighters into those areas. We've done the work that we can access in the areas that we deem safe, and the areas that have the higher potential for snags. It's been what Matt calls hot spotting. In other words, we don't build that continuous line. We don't string a lot of hose, miles and miles of hose. We set up the pumpkins and the pumpkins and the tanks and then we invest a lot of time in mopping up first 50 feet, then 100 feet. All that takes time. And the more time we have firefighters bent over doing this, the more chance that a snag can come down and take them out from behind, or when they're not watching. So all the firefighters have been working on this hillside have been looking at this for the entire time that our team has been here in September, and most people agree that we stand a lot better chance of catching that fire if we were to move out of the timber where it makes that transition in the grass sage fuels. Given the weather we've been having, the grass fuels aren't burning right now. That could change if things dry out, but likelihood of success goes way up if we can get it. When it starts coming out of the timber, gets out into the grassy fuels where we don't have any snags. So we eliminate that major hazard. A lot of that grass on that hillside in many places is fairly sparse. So for the ability for it to dry out and then wind to grab a hold of that fire, we don't see it as an extremely high likelihood. Could it happen? Absolutely. And does it cause us concern? Absolutely there too. So to help address some of those concerns of fire moving down in the foothills in the grass and sage, we still have a number of lines that have been constructed. The previous team before us, they started putting those lines in. We continue to fine tune and make those lines even better. Also completed some of the prep work around the water treatment plant. So in the event that fire we're able to come down into the lower end of Jesse Creek or Pollard Creek or Chips Creek, then we still have a defensible line to not only protect the water treatment plant, but also the outskirts of the south side of town. These are all what-if contingency plans. So what if we get back into a hot, warm, dry condition where fire season continues on and burns actively into October? We have the lines in place. We've had a good assessment of what type of fuels are out ahead of it, what our likelihood, chances of success are going to be, and more importantly, we also made sure that when we timed out, which is this evening, we were bringing in a similar team to ours, robust enough that can accomplish a lot of the other suppression repair work that Matt talked about, but pivot back into a full-on suppression mode in the event you get a return to more summer-like conditions. Talking about the fire in Jesse Creek and Turner Creek itself, latest GIS puts it at about 950 acres. There are some natural barriers in Turner Creek where the fire on the south side has kind of checked itself up against. It's scree slope for the most part. So that's positive in nature because what we did not want to see is that fire cross Turner Creek, get established on the other side of the drainage and get up into on the north aspect where it's a very heavy fuel type. And as you all probably know, fires that when they burn on a steep hillside go up, they burn at a lot higher intensity. And high intensity in the municipal watershed is not something anybody wants to see, both from the standpoint of it's going to make it harder to control that fire spread, but also the damage it could cause the watershed. So some of the things that we've been talking about doing is how can we manage the fire fire intensity of that watershed and keep it down to that backing fire spread at a low intensity, and that is where The forest has been working with the city council to make sure that they have a good understanding of some of the risks that we're facing, but also some of the opportunities that may have in the event this fire started moving, and let's just say across Turner Gulch, wanted to come up the other side. That's where that Wildland fire module that Matt was talking about, assign them to assess ahead of time, plan out what would they do, what if, in case, as a contingency plan, how would we go about putting maybe some fire on the opposite hillside and bring fire down? Because as we've described in numerous meetings before, if we can back that fire down the hillside, then we can control the intensity, keep it lower. Now, to some of the concerns of what's to stop the fire from continuing to go in the south, yeah, that won't do it. And we'll still have uncontained fire up on the hillside. And that's where, again, the exterior lines that we've got in place will come into play until the fire moves out into an area where there aren't as many snags. We can find a good ridge and potentially get some firefighters in there to put a stop to it. Ideally speaking, that doesn't happen. Ideally speaking, with some of the weather patterns as we get later in the season, keep things down low. And so we're dealing with a fair amount of uncertainty here is exactly how all this is going to play out. But we were leaving this fire in the hands of a team that has experience on this fire before. They understand the terrain, they understand the complexities. They too have spent quite a bit of time studying the terrain up in that area. So we will continue the effort similar to what my team has been doing for the last 2 weeks, except it's just a different team here in place. We'll continue to working with the forest, continue to keep the public informed of here's the conditions that we're under right now. The fire has not shown any signs of moving south. If that changes though, Trent's team is now in place. They can take a look at that and identify the appropriate actions that need to take place. So we're not leaving the town unguarded. We're not leaving the watershed completely unguarded. Still going to be firefighter presence on the hillside. When the fire doesn't exhibit any movement, they may be doing other work, but they will still be present along with Trent's team to take action if needed. So those type of things are going to be going on probably for the next 2 weeks at a minimum, and then as they get closer into after the first week of October, assess where we're at with the season, and if they need to bring another team in, I'm sure the forest will do what they need to do. So as I started out by saying, as we wind in our time, we just want to say that we appreciate the community support. We appreciate all the questions that you folks have asked. Part of managing an incident is not just fighting the fire. Part of being an incident management team is also working with all the cooperators, the stakeholders, the community to help everybody understand this is what we're worried about, this is what we're doing. We want to know what your concerns are so we can address them. We may not be able to change the answer, or we may not be able to change what the weather is doing or what the fire is doing, but at least we can all be on the same page as far as here's what we're seeing, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. And together we can work together to address the concerns and manage this fire. So it's been, on behalf of Great Basin Team 1, it's been an honor and a privilege to be up in here in your community, not just once but also twice. So we appreciate the hospitality and thank you very much.
Thank you, Evans. If you'll keep your microphone for just a minute, we might have some questions for you. That's the end of the fire portion. If we have questions pertaining to the fire that anybody would like to ask now, I think probably it'll work best. We have limited microphones. If I maybe try and repeat your questions so that we can hear online as well. Does anybody have questions for the fire staff? Go ahead.
Could you explain a little bit more about what a wildland fire use module is that you're applying to the top of the watershed?
Sure. So Wildland Fire Use Modules is it's crew configured in 10-12 person configuration with a slightly different skill set than your typical firefighting crew. Most firefighting crews, they specialize in suppression operations. You know, they train to that extent. The Wildland Fire Modules, they're also trained to fight fire, but they also have some additional skill sets involving monitoring, surveilling, gathering information, mapping. If they have to, they can put fire on the ground and control burning. When they're not on wildfires, they also do a lot of prescribed burning or control burning, if you will. So a little bit different skill set. Another skill set in their favor is a lot of them have quite a bit of patience. And this is a type of fire situation where you need to exercise a lot of patience and assist with the strategic planning, pass that information back to the team. Not to say other firefighters don't have patience, but a lot of firefighters, type A personalities, we want to go to work, we want to do stuff, we want to move dirt. This is a particular situation where, well, you can't get in there and move dirt and go direct on it and be proactive about it. This is one where you have to monitor, look at it, study it, figure out what is the best approach for it, and then at the appropriate time make the right tactical call on something. So a little slightly different skill set, but at the basic root of it, they're still firefighters. But yeah, that's what they come with.
Thank you, Evans.
Anyone else with questions? Excellent. We'll move to the forest topics, and we'll start with Bobby Filbert.
Okay. Okay, got to get mic'd up here. Hi, everybody. My name is Bobby Filbert, and I'm here as the district ranger for the Salmon Cobalt on the Door Ranger districts, and I'm on short-term assignment that'll have me here through the fall and early winter. So first, I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about some of the areas that we're opening up for firewood. These access routes are currently closed, but for firewood gathering, we went ahead and opened up the gates, which are identified as these little blue triangles. And those were opened this afternoon, and they'll stay open through October 9th. So this area, it's right up to north is Williams Creek Summit. So this is the Ridge Road, and this area is known as China Gulch or China Springs. And there's 3 different access routes in here that are now open for the public, for yourselves to go in and gather firewood. Again, all the same regulations for firewood gathering apply. You still need to have valid permits, which we can help you with at any of our offices. So just wanted to make sure that information is getting shared. These areas are known as, and I'm not sure exactly which one, but we have Deep Swan Road, Little Deep Road, and Copper Creek Spur A. So all of this information is available on the Salmon Chalice National Forest website, and again on the Facebook page and our Twitter page, again with the maps. And any questions, just give a call to one of our offices and we can help clarify that for you guys. So I wanted to make sure that that information was getting out there. Additionally, Matt earlier spoke to some of the wood that's being moved and will be staged, and as that wood that was harvested and cut to do the power line route where they were looking for some suppression lines there, that wood eventually will get decked, and we'll decide how that's going to be provided. Some of it will be available for the public in the future for firewood. Some of it will be sold commercially. And as we get more details on how that's going to be packaged, we'll make sure and get that information out to you as well. The next thing that I just wanted to put out a reminder to everyone, we still do have a closure in place. And having some of this weather come in, it's great. It provides an opportunity for the suppression actions to change to repair. Everything can settle a little bit, but we still have some weather ahead of us. But we'll be reevaluating that closure as it makes sense, and also with fire restrictions that are currently in place. As we move into October, we'll be looking to reevaluate that as well to see what we can do to provide, to lift those restrictions when it makes sense as well. The next thing I want to mention, and we put out some communication today, so I just want to take a moment and say that it's with great sorrow that we share some news about a passing of a firefighter. His name is Gerardo Rincon, and he was with North Reforestation Crew, and he suffered a medical emergency in the early morning hours of the 20th of September. He was a crew boss, and he was assigned to the Moose Fire, and he had been a firefighter for quite some time. So with this, I just wanted to mention that the forest here is working very closely with the incident management team and the Wildland Firefighter Foundation to return Gerardo home to his home in Oregon. And that's going to happen early Saturday morning, this Saturday. And in honor of that, we'll be having a procession that will take place. It'll start at the Jones and Casey Funeral Home. and it'll move through Salmon down Main Street and out to the Lemhi County Airport, and that will begin at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning. So just want to put out some condolences to the entire Rincon family and to his friends and to his colleagues. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Gina Knutson. I'm with the Salmon Chalice, and I'm part of the burned area emergency response team. I see at least one other member of that team, and what we're going to talk about tonight and what we'll continue to talk about is something that you all have expressed interest in pretty much since this fire started quite a long time ago, and that is post-fire. So this forest has been highly aware that that's going to be an issue, as Evans and other members of his team have mentioned, started talking about things like suppression repair. We've started looking at what's going to happen in terms of emergency response. And emergency response is not the same as suppression repair, something that those teams start doing as soon as they put in things like dozer lines. So what we've got is a team that's made up of people like Nate Meyer from the timber shop. We've got range specialists, hydrologists, all kinds of road engineers, recreation specialists who got out on the forest as soon as it was possible to access the moose fire safely, and started looking at things like how severely the soil was burned. And one of the tools that they use is a modern tool of satellite imagery, where they can get an idea of how severely soil was burned. But then they take those images and they go do ground truthing. And so in the past couple of weeks, I'm probably in the way, but in the past couple of weeks, that team has been out there. And it's a really rapid assessment. So what they do is they'll go back, get together, make sure that the maps that we saw with the satellite imagery and their ground truthing match up. And then they'll make recommendations about emergency responses. And that could be emergency stabilization measures that make sure that those roads are safe for travel. Sometimes culverts will get damaged, and that can put roads and trails at risk. So what we're expecting to see in the next couple of weeks is that report from them. And then right away we start having conversations, Chuck and our leadership team start having conversations with the regional office about providing funds for those specific short-term emergency responses. And I just want to emphasize that that is short-term. What this team looks at is basically storm events that are likely to happen in the next year, and how the forest and our public lands might be affected by storm damage that's specifically caused by this fire. So I wanted to let you know that we've been so impressed and appreciative of the information that these teams that have been working on the moose fire have been able to provide to our community and to our public lands fans. And I just want to let you know we're committed to maintaining that as we look at this post-fire response, because we know it's something that's really important to all of you, and it's really important to all of us. So that's all I have for right now. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Gina. Does anybody have any questions for the forest topics? Yes, ma'am.
Question on, you were talking about emergency rehab or treatment, blah, blah, blah. What about our lakes? Is the amount of runoff going to cause the lakes to be dead for a period of time? Or who can we contact to find out that type of information, since the caustic level will change the pH?
Going to let Gina answer that question.
Yeah, so I'm not really in a position to answer about specific issues like that, but I can tell you when we get that report, you talked about water quality, and so we've got hydrologists as well as fisheries biologists looking at those types of things. And so that is something we'll be able to communicate with you all about. But just off the cuff, one thing I can tell you is that as these folks come back from the field, I can tell you they're more encouraged than they expected to be. So yeah, so just wanted to share that. But we will be talking definitely about things like water quality, and we know outfitters are worried about the steelhead fishing season, so these are the kinds of people that we know need to hear the information that we have.
Now, will that be coming from the Forest Service or from fisheries or?
No, that'll be coming from this forest.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you bet.
Any other questions? Thank you all for joining us tonight. If you have questions that you'd like to ask people individually, we'll be standing here for a little while and try and help you out with that. Appreciate all your support during our time here as Great Basin Team 1, and we hope that you pass on that support to the next team who will be working hard to serve you as well. Y'all have a good night.